Many of you may or may not remember that throughout this year in particular, we have been following very often dipping into what's been going on in Hull, because Hull is the home to, especially in the north of England, home to super trawlers. And super trawlers are pretty much the future of the shall we say, the fishing industry. They catch essentially what the small boats of what you saw a lot of the, shall we say, the fishing for leave heavily try and prioritize. They do in a single day probably what it takes about a month for one of these small boats to actually catch. And the reason why these have again become so more popular, and again now are pretty much the backbone of where most of the fish you eat comes from a super trawler and not one of these small boats, is purely industrialization. It's a cold hard fact. It's just industrialization, and as a result, we've actually seen small boats become newer and more industrialized to try and compete against these. In fact, what you'll most find actually that the small fishing boat fleets here in the UK are actually old boats because and they can't compete against these big ones. So again, it's a very, very classic case of industrialization versus the non-industrialized stuff, and the industrialized stuff always wins. History has pretty much shown that. However, the Brexit deal has pretty much meant that the super trawler that used to go out and fish in Norwegian waters, because of the quota under this new, again, the fishing deal that was done by the Boris Johnson and the Brexiteers, basically means they can only go out once a month. So at this point, it is no longer viable for this trawler to even exist. And it has taken roughly about a year almost. Because you may remember this time last year, I think the Boris Johnson's oven ready deal had been announced, and this is what he was going to do. This is the Brexit deal. It was all going to be fantastic, but don't look at it too much. So we're going to pass it as quickly as we can. It was around this time last year, and what's happened? We've covered this fishing trawler and this company twice throughout the year, and both times they've said things aren't good. We're entering dire straits, and this is the dire straits. They are now having to either sell the trawler or move it abroad. And if you sell the trawler, it will probably go abroad anyway, losing all its jobs that it has. And if it moves abroad, well, it will lose the jobs in Hull as well. So, as always, we'll dive into this article and find out more what's going on. But before we do that, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much to all those people who do support the channel that way. There's also the YouTube memberships that are now open as well. So let's dive into this then. This comes from Hull Live with the Kirkella, I think that's how you say it, Kirkella trawler may be sold or moved abroad after devastating fishing deal. The owners of Hull's last deep-sea trawler have warned the vessel may be sold or moved abroad after the new fishing deal with Norway, which they says makes their business unviable. The Kirkella has been standing idle since December of 2020, when the UK lost its rights to fish in Norwegian waters following Brexit. And UK fisheries who operate the Kirkella said that the new deal struck with the Scandinavian country leaves the crew with a quota amounting to just 1 week's worth of work. The fishing pact will see fleets from both countries able to catch up to 30,000 tons of cod, haddock and hake from the North Sea, according to the government. But the owners said that it just won't be enough to help sustain their crew of ship of at least 30. The first mate, Charlie Ward, told the BBC, "I feel for the men. I feel for all these men that have got children. One of them has got 7. I feel very sorry for them, for their life has been fishing. Since they left school, all they wanted to do was come fishing, and they loved the job. The mood in the crew at the moment is that they are blaming the government because they sold them down the road. They wanted Brexit. They wanted Brexit, the government, and they got the fishermen to back them, and the fishermen backed them, and they all stood and backed them. But the industry in Hull, they've all sold it down the road. There is nothing for them now. The government has claimed that this deal would see UK vessels allowed to catch more than 7,000 tons of cod in the Arctic, an increase of over 1,500 tons compared to 2021. These figures, though, have been slammed by the UK fisheries, who say that the deal is a complete disappointment that could spell the end of their business. UK Fisheries Chief Jane Sadnell said that I would say that with this deal, we're more than disappointed. We're absolutely devastated for the crew, to be honest. The government was fully aware of what we needed to operate to be a viable business. And frankly, these kinds of words are just platitudes. I can only conclude that they just didn't really care. And they really just didn't care. They used the fishing and fishing as an excuse, as a convenient ploy. And many people indeed did fall for it. Many fishing communities did indeed fall for it. They'd been falling for the stuff Nigel Farage has been spouting for a number of years, though. So it wasn't too surprising when they decided to back Brexit. Unfortunately, they backed the wrong horse in this case. Mr. Sandel later told the Yorkshire Post that we're seriously going to have to think about the way ahead. More possibly selling, downsizing, or the shareholders might decide just to take the investment out of the UK. It's the hardest commercial decision we'll have to make. It's been forced on us. So, obviously very sad news, but this happened like literally less than a year than Boris Johnson announced his, again, fantastic deal. Lots of fishing communities up and down the UK have been facing incredibly hard times, not just because of COVID, but because of, again, these new fishing rules. We saw earlier this month, of course, the spat between the UK and France over Britain refusing to give the fishermen in the Channel Islands their fishing licenses, where they've been fishing for years. Again, that was just very, very tit for tat, a tiny little thing that they tried to spin as some sort of Brexit win. Look at us, we're sticking up for British fishermen. They weren't at all. Indeed, the government backed down very, very quickly when France threatened to escalate things. And just like this trawler being sold here, you're going to see other trawlers probably be sold or just moved abroad. That's just basic economies. And of course, the fishing industry here in the UK is going to go and enter into a complete downward spiral. Indeed, as the article says, they got completely sold up the river. Completely sold up the river, left adrift. And at the end of the day, the government just really didn't care. They just really didn't care at all. You were just a very, very convenient chip that they could use at that time. And unfortunately, you fell for it hook, line, and sinker. Do you have my sympathies? Yes. Yes, you do. It's very sad when anyone loses their job. But more importantly here, the fact that a lot of you, again, were promised that this would be the revival of the British fishing industry, that Brexit would be the great savior of it, that, this would be able to be saved. And no, it really wasn't. The fishing industry was indeed changing long before Brexit even happened. The writing's been on the wall for a while now in the fishing industry, and a lot of people really in that industry haven't really been paying attention to it. Let's put it that way. And yes, they have been involved by the government, but the fishing industry really isn't a crucial industry to the government, to the UK anymore. It's worth less than 1% of GDP. There are far, far bigger, more important industries that have far more, shall we say, the ear and attention of the government than the fishing industry ever really did. So, while you have my sympathies, they only extend so far, and maybe next time around when we, shall we say, vote again, you'll make the right decision. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there's links to my Patreon page and a one-off donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.